Welcome to Yeshiva Daf Shir sponsor Lui Nishmas Arbi Yaakov Shalom and Leah Bas Yitzchok. We're holding in Basra Daf Pegimel. We're starting at Pei Beis and Beis towards the bottom. It's about, let's say, 12 lines or 11 lines on the bottom. The one says, Kama yeh binim. How much you have to have between the trees. So we learned in the Mishnah that I have 3 trees. I buy the land in between. But the trees have to have a certain distance that it's considered to be reasonable to have trees with a land. But if I have trees that are too close to each other, so then you're not going to keep them, you're going to cut them off. If they're too far away from each other, they're not connected. So what is the distance that makes them one? Says the Gemara 2 sheets. From 4 to 8. If between the distance between the trees is 4 amas until 8 amas. So then these trees it's considered to be, that's good enough of a distance. They're spaced enough and not too far from each other. Big machlekes that we're showing over here is the ad val bechlal ad v'la bechlal. Is it 4 to 8, including 4 to 8, or up to 4 to 8, up to 8, not more? The minimum is 8 amo, 4 amo for your tree until 16. Don't argue on Rav. Why not? Then Tran Masnisin Kavasei, we have a Mishnah like him. Then if you have a vineyard and you have 60 nama distance between the vines, you're allowed to plant in between. Because if you have 60 nama, it's already a big distance. Not less than 60 nama, or up to 60 nama, it's a good enough distance. It's considered to be connected. It's considered to be a vineyard. We have a din bakilayim. When you have a vineyard, you're not allowed to plant in the vineyard another zera, another plant. If you have a vineyard, you're not allowed to do that. So what is a vineyard? When you say it's a single vine, and when you say it's a vineyard? As Rav points out over in the sugya, the full vineyard has to be 5 trees at least. We'll see a little bit more about it later in the daf. 5 trees create a vineyard. It's a square of 4 and 1 sticking out. So the 5 trees, how do you connect them? So it says you have to have 60 amma in between. If you have more than 60 amma, it's not a vineyard, it's single vines. So you see 60 amma is the shear. There was a story with Salmon. It was a guy who did a 60 amma distance between the rows of the vines. What happened? He had 2 rows of vines. What he did is, then he had another row, right? Another row. In between there's 16 amas. What did he do? He let the trees that are growing on 2 sides have the branches facing the same place, the same middle ground. In the next row, he left it open, and on the next row they grow again. Meaning, every 16 amma, they had branches in it. The next 60 amma was empty. The next 60 amma was branches in it. The next 60 amma was empty. Right? So what happened was like this. When every year, he did 1 year, he grew the trees, made all the branches go into the space between, let's call it space A. Year number 2, space A was empty. And he tilted the branches to the other side. So the spaces went to space B and space C. Space A was empty. So that's what he did. So the Chacham said he could plant in between. Right? What did he do? He made an empty space. He left it open. And he planted the empty space. He said it's okay. Now, why do we care that the branches move from one side to another? The Rishbam learns that's enough community legabe kilai. Why? Because the 16 amma that I say you need to have space is not between the trunk of the vines. It's between the branches of the vines. Not between the roots. You have to have an actual space, 16 amma. So this is what this guy, the person in Betzalmoin, right? That's what he did. He made sure that it will always be 60 amma distance. How did he do that? He made sure the branches all tilting to the same space. So the other area was completely empty. I have 60 amma, I can plant over there. That's what the Rishbam does. Many of the Rishonim argue in the Rishbam say no. I don't care about the branches, I care about the trunk. I care about the roots. If between the roots you have 16 amma, I don't care if the branches are tilting here as well. So why did this guy move the branches? Not because of Hilchos Kilayim, just because of comfort. If the branches are tilting over here, I can't really plant it. So I moved it to the other side. But the main focus is on the 60 amma distance between the branches. That's what the Rishonim discussed. But the point that Gemara is saying over here, I have a story. Because there was 60 amma, I let you to plant in between. Mashra, would be less than 60 amma, you're not able to plant. It would be considered a vineyard. You can't plant in between. So you see from here that the distance between trees to connect them together is less than 60 amma. Says the Gemara, so you see a right from there. In other words, the Rav Yosef, the way the Rashbam says it, Rav Yosef, we know, forgot his learning. So Rav Nachman is telling Rav Yosef, Abai tells Rav Yosef, you forgot your learning. Let me tell you a story. I think you maybe made a mistake, and this is the right halacha. Says, and I do remember a story. I can tell you right away a story that did happen. What's the story? In the city of the shepherds, also they went in front of Yehuda. Meaning they went, someone sold our case of our Mishnah. Someone sold 3 trees, and that has land in between, and there wasn't 8 amas in between. And he told them that even though you have to give him Kimaloi Boker V'Kelim, you have to give enough space for him to plant it. In other words, he's giving him the land. How much he told you have to give him enough space of a Boker V'Kelim. Because I heard what it says, it says that when you plant a tree, make sure not to have it close to the field of your friend. Because we learned Leil Kilayim, so you have to have 4 amas. Dal is the space you need to work the keren. We're talking about 4 amas, right? So he said 4 amas. He says here not because you need 4 amas, because in Bavel their plower is only 2 amas. But it's because Hilchos Kilayim you have 4 amas. So you see over here that a 4 amma distance, that's good enough, as long as you have that. So that's what it is. And now the Rashbam learns that was the distance you have between the trees. Kimaloi Boker V'Kelim. So you see you have Kimaloi Boker V'Kelim. That's what you have. That you see that 4 amma is good enough. That's exactly like Rav Yosef. So in general, why was Abaye questioning Rav Yosef? Okay, Rav Yosef means like now don't we have a Mishnah like Rav Yosef that says that's 4 ammas? We learned Fatanan, the Rabach adds, when you have a space of 8 amas in the vineyard, 8 amas, the space is not connected anymore. So you see a fair Mishnah like Rav Yosef. He says that's not a problem. It's better to bring a Maisa from a story is better than a Mishnah. Because the Mishnah tells you that was a Shita. A story says that's the Pasuk in the Maisa. I always want to bring a story more than the actual Mishnah. So he says that's about a question of Rav Yosef. Says more Bishul Rav Yosef, Alibu de Abshimin, Shamin le Mefuzarim, Vishamin le Ritzufim. So Rav Yosef, he brought a raya, right? He said 4 to 8 amas. What was Rav Yosef's sheet? It needs to be between 4 to 8. So I have a raya to 4, and I have a raya to 8. How do I have a raya to both? Mefuzarim, 8 amas, Hadamor, we just said before. We had a Mishnah that said 8 amas. And we had a Mishnah with Tzufim. Now, even though we had a story about Tzufim, we wanted to bring a Mishnah. Not Kerem and the 2 apokas without down, we say in a Kerem. If it's less than 4 amas in between, it's considered to be, you're going to cut off the trees. It doesn't join as a vineyard. Kerem is a vineyard. We see, look at the middle one. Now there, this is something we saw also earlier in the Masechta. So where it says, you know what, the 4 amas is the minimum. So what happens if I have less? So either it's nothing, or I'll consider it as if it's cut off. So what do you see over here? See, the 4 amas is the minimum. So you see our views of 2 mishnas, 4 amas and 8 amas. I see everything like Rav We did hear about Mefuzarim. Why? Where did we see that from the story? Right? For the story of Tzalmon, we said 16 amas. Where do we find this thing of that the minimum is 8 amas? So it was Savaru. If Rav Shimon is half of 8. In other words, he says maximum in order for it not to be too far is 8 amas. What's the minimum not to be too close? 4 amas. So according to Rav Nachman, that the maximum is 16 amas. So the minimum is 8 amas. That's the svar. So the one comes and says, I don't have a right to that, it's a svar. But now this gives us opening to the next shito. What's the next shito? No. 60 amas is the next. 4 amas is the minimum. Not half. Taika say the Rav, bring a right to Rav. Kamiyu mikrovim, how close can it be? 4 amas. The kamiyu mirchakim, how far can it be? 16. The minimum was 4, the next was 16. Clearly based on Mishnah, creating the land. If the tree died or cut off, if that you have that shear. Because become less than 4 amas, or Yesel can more than 16. He bought the trees on their own. He didn't buy 3 trees together. It's not according to the karka or the trees. The tree dies or cut off. So clearly over here you see the din from 4 to 16. This is this halacha to be paskin like Rava and not like the shittas that we saw before. When I want to measure the 40, 60 amma between the trees, what do you measure? From the wider part of the tree or from the narrower part of the tree? What's a kuva shebegefen? We have a big machlokes rishonim. Is rekuva means hakava, grafting, grafting. That you put one tree into another. And you say when you do rekuva, you start from the ikar sheni. What's the ikar? Is the nut. So there was Bava, the ikar sheni means that you don't start from the bottom of the tree, which is very wide. Not from the top of the tree, which is narrow, but from the middle one. That's the distance. There's other shittas that say that the ikar sheni is the narrower part. And Tosfos learns that rekuva shebegefen is not harkava, not grafting. Talking bending. When you bend the tree into the ground and it grows another tree. So that's what we're talking about, and the ikar sheni talks about that you're referring to the part which is the second tree. As the Tosfos brings, avracha, that's what the Tosfos brings, and then he says you go from the wider part because he says you go from ikar sheni from the wider part. So what's the maskana? You go from the wider for the narrow. The Rashba goes from the middle. Some should say from the narrow, Tosfos learns from the right. What happens if he sold him 3 bod de'ilan? What does it mean 3 bod de'ilan? So he explains the Rashban, similar to what we saw before in the previous daf. He sold him one tree that it has 3 branches, that each branch is 4 amas away from each other. And then the land grew mud, the mud and that went into the land, and now it looks like 3 trees. Person went and did avrocha. Avrocha here, that's bending. Right? He took a tree, he put it into the land. Now, why do you have to say he was mavrich chviyah? So Rashbam explains, because we saw before. What is the size of a vineyard? 5 trees. So if I have 3 that are being bent and grew more, you have 6 trees now. You have a vineyard which is 5. If they have 48, it's considered to be a vineyard. Because you didn't cut them off. So what do you see over here? Even though it's coming from the same tree, even though it's all coming from the same source, I mean, each double is coming from the same source because they'd be a separate tree. Because in the ground it goes alone. So the same thing over here, you consider to be each one its own tree. We said 3 trees gives you a land. What happens if you have 2 trees in the land, one on the border? The border is like a separate area. Is it the same thing, the same halacha? Or, what happens if we say the border, let's say, is considered to be 1? What happens if he has 2 in his own land? And 1 he's buying from his friend. Together there are 3. So he says, I want my land to connect it. He says, no, but for me you buy 3, for me you buy only 1. I don't care about you, it's 2. So the more take it. Here's the Gemara that begins on the base. Boy Ravashi. Bor Mahu Shetafsik. If I have trees, and between the trees, I have a bor. I have a pit. The trees connect. I have a little flow of water. Let's say between. Ridicula is when you have many trees connect together. Do they stop it? The Rishban says the bar is less than Amasamayim. Amasamayim is less than Shusharabim. Ridicula is the most. What's his take? He'll ask a question to Rebbe. What happens if an erez grew in between the 3 trees? So Allah, which was the data for him, if it grew. He bought the 3 trees, he got the land, now it grew in his land. So sorry. So of course it belongs to him. Elahaya erez b'neimah. He has a cedar tree in between. Does he coin it or not? So of course you coin it because you coined the trees in between when you bought 3 trees. Says how the 3 trees are standing. Shur means one line, 3 trees, 1 inch line. Chatzuva means like a stool, like a chair that has 3 legs. So the 3 legs, as the Rishban, look at the Rishban, looks like a segel, 2 and 1, right? Because they have to be like connected. If you hold 3 lines, so of course Chatzuva is selling the land in between. No, it says no, I'm not selling you land in between. My time should be misdirect. It's very easy for me to continue plowing my field in between your trees, nothing bothering me. My time, why say Chatzuva not? Because it's harder to plant in between when you have 3 trees in the shape of a segel. I sold you these 3 plants called Higi Romaiso. The Rishbam explains they're like type of thorns. That's very hard to walk in between because they cause a person to get hurt. Will you have a land too? So meaning, and they got to the more conclusions in Rashbam, there's 2 conditions in order to have the land. You have to have an important tree. If you know what an important tree is going to talk about. And when you have an important tree, it has to be planted a certain way. So being planted a certain way is not enough to give you the land. It has to have both conditions. So that's why Igor Maisa doesn't have both conditions. That's why you don't have the land. Okay, let's do the Mishnah. We'll start the Mishnah more going to the Sugya Beis Hashem tomorrow's stuff. So the Mishnah. First of all, we're starting with Amoiche Roish Behi Mugaso Lo Mochar Saraglaim. You sell the head of a Behi Mugaso, of a big animal, like a cow. You didn't sell the legs. The legs are not included with the head. Mochar Saraglaim, Mochar Sarash, Samulit. You sell the legs. You didn't sell the head. Mochar Sakone. The konim is the tube that goes into the lungs, connects to the lungs. The Mochar Sakone didn't sell the liver, even though it's right next to it. Mochar Sakone sell the liver, like Mochar Sakone. Aval, that's the gaso. That's a big animal, like a cow. Al Bedako, like a sheep. Mochar Sarosh, Mochar Saraglaim. You sell the head, you sell the legs too. That's the normal way. The normal way of selling is when you sell the head, the legs are included. Mochar Saraglaim, no Mochar Sarosh. But the opposite, you sell the legs, you're not selling the head. Mochar Sakone, Mochar Sakone. You sell the lungs, you do sell the liver. You sold the liver, you didn't sell the lungs. That's the Chamoichim, and that's the Mishnah says. Says the Mishnah now. Now, again, we're just going to see this as a preview. We'll get back to it tomorrow. But this connects back to the Sugya of Mitzio that has to do with Oino. When a person buys and sells, and we did a mistake there, the numbers don't match up. So then you have a din Oino. What's usually a din Oino that we learned in Masechet Mitzio? The din Oino is if a person sold a shtus higher, or a shtus lower, which means a 6 higher than the price, or a 6 lower than the price. So then if the seller sold it for too much, the buyer gives it back the money. If the buyer sold it for too much, the seller gives it back the money. That was one thing of shtus. Yoysa shtus, the bank is batel. Less the shtus, nothing. That's what we learned in Masechet Mitzio. Basically, we'll get back to it more, just to see what we're talking about. Talk to Mishnah. There's 4 types of sellers. He sold him good wheat, but in fact it's not good wheat, it's bad wheat. So the buyer was misana. The Lekech could change his mind. It's the opposite. He sold him bad wheat, and he found good wheat. So the seller could change his mind. Now, the big machlokes should over here, is this a regular simple diloi or not? The Rashbam learns this is not a simple diloi over here. So it's like right now. The Rashbam learns kemoyer no shtus, and the Achronim explained that it's not a mamish or no. So he said, because here we're talking about it as it's a little different than I know, which we'll get back to tomorrow. But we're going into the sugya of I know. Okay, that's what we have to say. So if the seller once sold him something which he didn't agree to, the buyer could say, I want to change your mind. The buyer sold the seller something he didn't agree to, the seller can change his mind. Roy Seditzu Royce, bad wheat that is found bad wheat. Yavuz Mitzu Yavuz, exactly as they said, and the Chad Yochol Nachzor, they can't change their mind. The sale was a good sale. Shechamti Zenitis Levono. Levono and Shechamti, there's two different types of wheat. Eitim Shel Zayis and Shel Shikmo, Shel Shikmo to Shel Zayis, two different types of trees. Yain Nitza Choyim and Choyim Nitza Yain, Shneim Yochol Nachzor, but they both can change their mind. Why? Because that's how they sell, they make it those. So the Pashup shot is, in the first case, they agreed on wheat, he bought wheat. Just bad wheat and good wheat. So the one who got ruined can change his mind. In the last case, it's not what we agreed upon. It's a different sale. So it's a mekachtos, it goes back. These Hashem will continue, start tomorrow, from the Arba Midas, go into the little more Biyun, and we'll take it from there into the next stuff. Kol Tuv, have a wonderful day.